Hi, friends. Welcome to 15241 Today Talk. And our special guest, Jim Render, and I are most pleased to have the executive director of the WPIAL, Tim O'Malley, with us. Tim, thanks for joining us. And you're about to retire. When is the retirement date for you?
Yesterday. No, June 30th be my last day.
How many years executive director?
14. I've been with the league about 26.
And where did you start? Are you from Pittsburgh?
I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm an Avonworth High School grad back. I won't tell you when because that begins to reflect your age.
All right.
But and then I began my teaching career at Moon, and again I won't tell you when because that too will reflect my age. But I went from teaching at Moon, an athletic director. Had the good fortune to coach high school football for about 21 years, 11 of those as a head coach, and then I moved into the athletic director's realm. And through that, transitioned into the WPIL, and again, as indicated, been there for 14 years.
Now, congratulations on the fabulous job that you've done. And
subjectively evaluated, huh?
Pardon that?
Subjectively evaluated.
No, I've been pleased to be a part of high school sports for 10 years, and I'm really pleased that I've had a chance to get to know you. You guys have known each other a little while.
We have.
Again, we're not saying how long. And I've always had a great relationship with the WPIL. It's been smooth sailing.
Always. But Jim doesn't remember this, but back in the day when I was a young coach, would come down in clinic with him because of his expertise. He didn't remember it, but that was valued, that he would take the time back in the day to take somebody and try to impress upon us what it was that he knew and how it was that he did things, and that was greatly appreciated. So again, he doesn't remember, but I certainly do. The fact that he's taken umbrage with me over the past couple of years, I do remember that, but take no offense to it. And
who came with you when we had a little clinic?
I can't even remember. I think I might have been at Hopewell or at Moon, one of the two. But in fact, one time I remember Jim called me because he couldn't find a scrimmage, and I think I was at Moon at the time, and we were going up to Knock. So at the time, Larry Kunzelman was kind enough to take all three of us up
right
there. There was a time back in the day, probably in the early 80s, that we got along very well.
Still do.
Now, come on, you guys are being a little bit sarcastic here, correct?
Just because North Allegheny was awarded a touchdown when the kid caught the ball a yard out of bounds.
What did he have to do with that?
Nothing. I'll tell you what he had to do with it. He got the television people to quit showing the replay.
Well, the funny thing about that is that unlike what they see on TV in the NFL, and I don't even know, maybe in college, high school rules forbid the use of replay to make decisions. And that was, one of the things that was a problem down in Hinesfield, because obviously it was a wrong call. It was a terribly wrong call. But it couldn't be corrected because of that, and the continued replay only infuriated the people in attendance. There was nothing that they could do to reverse that. So again, I did effort to make sure that they limited the numbers of times that they had shown it again, because it was wrong. They made a mistake, but they couldn't undo that mistake. And again, the rules don't allow for that. In fact, I think now the PIAA will allow, in basketball only, the use of the monitor, if you have one, in the state final, if you can make a determination that, something was wrong. But again, they specify in the state final, and only if there's a monitor that the officials can go to. So we have not evolved that far in the state or in the sport of football yet. But again, I've gone on record saying the call that was made that fateful day down at Three Rivers, well, that was Hinesfield. Hinesfield was a bad call.
All right, let's backtrack a little bit. Why was it that you decided that you wanted to be in education?
When I grew up playing, went to school and played, at some point in time you figured that was probably the best way to go when you couldn't play anymore. The time to get into coaching was the decision. You made that decision to do that. I think any number of us at that time, that was the direction that we had taken. And never knew that it would grow to where it did. I had the very good fortune of being associated with a number of people that took, for whatever reason, me under their wing. Rip Shear, a gentleman from Moon High School that gave me a chance. and for whatever reason continue to promote what it was that I did. And then I had the very good fortune to interact with Charles Ace Heberling, again through Rip Shear, and for whatever reason Ace took me under his wing. Would yell at me. He would make sure that I was fully aware what his feelings were in any situation up until the day that he passed. But those two people in particular were influences in what it is that I did and how it is that I did it.
What you like best about coaching?
Just the interaction with the kids. I didn't have the success that Mr. Render had on the sideline. And so that when I stepped away from it, somebody asked it if I missed it. I said, I didn't miss Friday nights when things didn't go well. That was very difficult. But I think the week leading up to it and the opportunity to try to interact with kids in such a way to make them believe in what it was that they could accomplish, I think was enjoyable. And that I miss, that type of interaction. I didn't miss not being successful on Friday.
You and I had a conversation when I left the Pirates. I was thinking about becoming an athletic director, and I'm so glad that you gave me some great advice, and I ended up at Waynesburg as a professor. But the hours for an athletic director, and the commitment that you have to make to it, what a job that is.
Those guys that choose to do that, or those women that choose to do that, yeah, it's a tremendously time-consuming undertaking. People don't really understand, and I don't think you can do the job. If you want to work 8 hours a day, you're not going to work 1 to 9 every night. You're going to have to come in because the school day begins at 7:30, and there are things that are required of you as being involved in the educational setting that can only be done at 7:30. So if you're not getting home until 10, you better get up and get in by 7 so that you can do the things that are germane to the job. It's not a 40-hour-a-week position. And I think some of the aggravation that comes with it, you can deal with the aggravation that you create. The aggravation that you have to deal with that you didn't create but have to react to is sometimes a challenge. And I think when you oversee and supervise people that are involved in interscholastic athletics, things don't always go smoothly across the board. You may be unaware of what might be going on until you get that call in the morning by somebody you have to deal with. So the challenges are real. They're ongoing. They don't go away. And again, you have to have a thick skin and a work ethic to be able to do it. And we're very fortunate here in Western PA that we have a high number of very highly qualified athletic administrators that do their jobs very well.
What your job as the executive director of the WPIL, where do you spend your most time in that position?
Unfortunately, as it has evolved now, and I think what Amy's going to be coming into is administrating to the PIA rules and regulations. That's one of the more difficult things. Back in the day, I think administering to your sports-specific tournaments and overseeing the committees that oversee those was, but now with the change of the rules and with the ever-changing rules, there are more and more situations that arise and occur that require an awful lot of your time. The most recent change to the PI bylaws was that any student that has played a sport in either 10th or 11th grade and transfers, if they're found to be eligible in the regular season, they are presumptively ineligible in the postseason, period, just because of the virtue of the fact that you've transferred. There's a narrow window that has to be opened for you to have postseason eligibility. If that window doesn't open far enough and the district committee denies postseason eligibility, the opportunity to be heard is granted to the people that transferred, resulting in an inordinate number of eligibility hearings that we have to have. There were 11 dates this year that we've had eligibility requests that had to be heard, and on those dates, multiple hearings up to as many as 3. And that doesn't include the monthly meetings that the board members have to sit through. So from a time-consuming standpoint, it's in preparation for and administering of those rules and regulation changes that occur and trying to make sure that there's a consistency in application of the rules, so all kids are treated equally.
So you're talking a WPIL hearing or a PIAA hearing?
Well, what happens, the way the process works is that if there's a finding from our district committee, the WPIL, that is adverse to what somebody wants to hear, they have the opportunity to appeal it at our level. We're the lower court, if you will. And if the finding that we issue ultimately at this level is one that they didn't want to hear, then they have the option to go to the PIAA on appeal, and ultimately they're the ones that make the decision whether or not that's upheld or overturned. And again, it's an ever-changing. The rationale behind it was because of the fact that there was a lot of talk about the unlevel playing field between the publics and the privates, or the non-boundaries as they're called now, because they're just, some of the public charter schools are public schools, but they're charter, they don't have boundaries, they bring kids from anywhere. So the imbalance competitively that has occurred has led the State Board of Directors to revise their rules, resulting in an attempt to try to control postseason play and simply saying if you transfer, you're ineligible, in the hope that that will level that playing field.
Well, all right, let me ask, if a young man lives in Harrisburg and his father is transferred to Pittsburgh after his sophomore year, are you saying that that young man would not be eligible, let's say, at Upper St. Clair High School for the playoffs?
He is by rule ineligible.
Yes.
To which an appeal can be made, and if there can be substantiation that that move was necessitated by a change of employment, then the board can grant eligibility. But by rule, the answer to your original is yes, he's ineligible. If he comes from California, by rule, he's ineligible. The school that receives that student then has to make an appeal to the district committee, the WPIL, and once it's substantiated that it was not just a voluntary move where somebody moved from Peters Township to St. Clair, and they did so because the reality was they didn't like what was going on athletically, they come over here. By rule, they're ineligible coming over. If they can substantiate a legitimate reason as to why, and it was necessitated by a change of employment that required that I move here, the board can grant eligibility. But to answer your question, at the top of the day, they're ineligible, and they have to prove as to why they should be eligible. And again, obviously it doesn't seem like but I think the intent behind the rule was to try to make sure that those transfers that were occurring, especially between the public and the non-boundary schools, they were going to control those to a point that it was going to hopefully level the competitive playing field in the postseason.
All right, let me ask you a related question. If you have more than, 3 or 5 transfers, they can move you up a division?
There is a competition formula that the PIAA has, and in a 2-year period in the sport of football, if you advance in their tournament, not the district tournament, but in the state tournament far enough, and if you've had X number of transfers, I think it's in football 4 in a 2-year period, they can bounce you up in class.
That happened to Aliquippa.
That happened to Aliquippa, and currently, because this is a realignment year, every 2 years the state requires of its member schools to submit enrollment numbers by October 15th of every odd-numbered year, and they submit the enrollment. The state then assigns to you a classification. We, the district committee and the WPL, then we will assign sections for the next 2-year cycle. We can't do that in basketball yet, because there's a handful, as many as 6 or 8 schools that are currently in the state tournament that have had transfers that if they progress far enough in the state tournament, they're going to be forced up in classification. Then again, the ones that are going to probably advance far enough to come under scrutiny, the Chartiers Valley girls for sure, the North Catholic girls for sure, I think the North Catholic boys for sure, Lincoln Park boys for sure, depending on how far they advance, they may be notified by the state probably in early April that they're up in class. Once they're notified that they're up in class, they can appeal that. So we may not know until mid-May which classification each school's been assigned to in the sport of boys and girls basketball, and typically we would have those schedules for the next 2 years out in early April. That's going to be put behind because of this competition. And it's only in football and basketball. They're the only 2 sports that's applicable, and the other ones doesn't count.
Where do you stand on this question about splitting tournament play between the public and the private?
We here have never been in favor of that. We have always been in favor of stricter enforcement of the rule in an attempt to control who goes from school A to school B. in an idealistic world, the people that live by the rules should have the same opportunity to play for the same trophy that everybody else plays for. And when you look at some of the non-boundary schools, be they private or public charter schools, some of them, as evidenced by their lack of success, obviously play by the rules. And to penalize them and to group them into a situation because some of the schools, have that advantage where they attract highly competitive athletes and therefore find success. We've always been in the opinion that if you enforce the rule the way it's written across the board in a unified sense, that would control that. The problem is I don't think that there's been uniformity in the enforcement of that rule over the years, as evidenced by some of the schools, especially out in District 12. Some of the basketball schools. Once District 12 was admitted, that's the Philadelphia district. Once they came into the PI, I remember one year being out watching the basketball finals. There was a highly qualified young man, played in 3 state finals on 3 separate teams, 3 separate charter schools.
In the same year?
No, 3 years in a row.
Okay.
He went, the point being that wherever the success was, you find your way to. And again, depending on how that transfer rule was enforced or the lack thereof, those kinds of things happened.
Are you on the PIAA board, or are you?
I'm not.
Who represents Western PA?
We have each district is represented proportionately by the numbers of schools that you have, and we're one of the biggest districts in the state, if not the biggest. And we have 3 of our members represent District 7, or the WPI, on the PI Board of Directors. That's our president, vice president, and our treasurer. They represent us. They vote. Back in the day when I was the president of the WPIL, I think we had at that time on the state board 17 or 19 total members. They were all district committee people. When the State Oversight Council came in and began to investigate the PIAA, they mandated an expansion to that board to include any number of people. It's up to 33 now. And there's still only 17 or 19 district representatives. The other folks that are there are, representing different constituencies that aren't necessarily district committee people. But we got 3 votes. And so when change is to occur, it obviously is by a majority rule at the state board level. Back in the day when we had 3 of 17, we were much better equipped, if you will, to influence some of the decisions. 3 of 33 doesn't factor well.
Have you ever, this may be a little controversial, have you ever been in a meeting about the success of Southern Columbia at the state level?
I've not been. I've had the opportunity to watch Southern Columbia, not only when I was a member of that board and went to every football game, and Southern Columbia was there all the time. And then this year, obviously, I said I was an Avonworth grad. I coached football at Avonworth back in the day, and they had a once-in-a-lifetime run, made it through here, went to the state final, and was absolutely, pummeled. I mean, when you can be the most successful team on one side of the state.
What are they doing?
I don't know.
They're obviously
apparently
bending the rules somehow.
Apparently there must be, I believe that they are, and again, this is vicarious because I'm not factually sure, but there is a tech school that is attached to their high school. So that when those kids choose to go to that tech school, they are enrolled full-time in Southern Columbia. They may not live in the Southern Columbia district. I don't know where the technical school students down here in this area go. I know when I was at Moon, Parkway area tech school was out there in the West Allegheny School District. But the kids that we sent from Moon to the tech school came back to us for half a day, and then they played for us. I don't believe that's the case with Southern Columbia. When you enroll there, you enroll there, and it gives them obviously an attraction ability. They have some good players.
And I think they also have cutoffs.
So they don't exceed a limit.
Well, they, for years they were single A, which would be like Avonworth or Avella going to the state finals 9 out of 10 years. I mean,
it doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen.
No. And again,
but Southern Columbia did it.
I think this year too, Jim, they by that competition committee were forced up in class. They were being forced up to AAA. They appealed that, and were successful on appeal. What were they in? AAA or AA this year? I think AAA. No, AA.
No, I don't think
they were
triple.
in AA.
Yeah.
It was AA. And so they were successful on appeal. They'll be in AA again for the next 2 years. So, but yeah, that was, again, it just demonstrated, like you said, a team that can come out of this side of the state and be successful, having defeated everyone they came up against, and run into that, and it was a mercy rule in the first half.
I watched that game
Yeah.
on TV.
It was a mercy rule in the first half. So that's a problem. I mean, that's not what there's something wrong there.
Tim O'Malley is our guest, executive director of the WPIAL. You're 14 years as the executive director. What are you most proud of? What are the things that you've accomplished in your tenure that you're most proud of?
I didn't get fired, so that's something that puts a smile on my face. And again, when I came in, my goals were, I think, reachable for me. And what I said from the day one, and I'll say on the last day, Ace Heberling built this league. Jimmy knew Ace, and what the WPIAL is, and what how it's thought of, and what it means to the people in Western Pennsylvania, is something I didn't want to screw up. So it's my hope that when I leave, is the people that make that evaluation can say that I didn't screw it up. Because obviously, when I was elected into that position, there was some animosity on my part if I could uphold what it was that the gentleman that preceded me built. And so you folks be the judge of that when I go. That was my goal, and hopefully I've accomplished it.
But you sound as if you're confident that's what you've done.
I'm trying. I got a couple months left.
You did not screw up the WPIL.
But, again, those gentlemen, Ace and then Larry, built the league. And, I played in the league when Ace was there. And it's important to the people here in Western Pennsylvania to have the WPIL as a goal to accomplish. You want to win that. And we've always said that. That's something that the kids here, when they put their helmets on in August, they want to win the WPIL. When they do that, then they want to win the state title. But to a man, they want to win the WPIL. And that's important to them. And we wanted to try to make sure that that goal was something that would be carried on going forward.
Do you still get emails or whatever, maybe even board members that think that maybe the WPIL ought to secede from the state?
No. Everybody no.
You
To
don't?
answer your question, no. There are frustrations that sometimes come about. People become frustrated. But the reality of it is every kid in the WPIL wants to win a WPIL title, then they want to win a state title. And we would be it would be irresponsible of us to try to go down the path to take that dream that somebody has away from them. We had, I think, 34 kids in wrestling this weekend that medaled out there. We'll have kids going out to swim that are going to swim for state titles. We had teams that played in the PIA football final to win that. Jimmy's been fortunate enough to be there and do that. We don't want to take that off of kids. The frustrations that we have are things, that might be associated with how things are administered to statewide, but never to the expense of succeeding. That could never happen.
Well, but as a guy who, we didn't go to the state tournament in 1988, the first year that the state had a tournament, and we won the 1989, but things are a lot different nowadays than they were in 1988 and 89. I mean, I'm not sure Upper St. Clair could go out to the east and play a charter school or a Philadelphia St. Joe, who's recruiting kids from 3 states. I'm not sure we could go out there and win anymore.
And that's the frustration. And I was so very happy that Billy won it this year because of his frustration with, on this side of the state,
Right.
Cathedral Prep. I mean, he could never step over that hurdle because of that. But again, when that does happen, and when it, I think it was Eric Kasparovich 2 years ago, they beat St. Joe's.
Right.
And again,
But it took an All-American quarterback. to do it.
Exactly. And I understand and the same thing's probably going to happen in basketball. In fact, the way some of those brackets are set up, it's going to be an Eastern final, because they have setting a 32-team basketball bracket up. You have teams from District 1 playing in the western side of the bracket. And again, some of those teams in District 1 and 12, as you indicated, they tend to attract more people than some of our schools do. So the chance for our kids to get there is remote, but again, it's a chance, and we wouldn't want to take that off of them.
You know, you might find this interesting, or maybe you'll think I'm dumb, but I must have lived and coached in Western Pennsylvania, Uniontown and Upper St. Clair, 30-some years before. Now, you have to understand, I grew up in Ohio and started coaching in Ohio, where the Ohio High School Athletic Association ran the thing, and everything came from Columbus out. Well, I lived here 30 years before I realized that the PIAA was not an arm of the state legislature, that the way the Ohio is, that the PIAA is an independent organization, as is the WPIAL. And I thought, there'll never be cohesiveness with two private groups, you know. So that's, I guess, why I ask, is there anybody in favor of?
No, we're not. And again, you know, the PIA is, as are we, independent from legislative oversight. Although it wasn't but 15, 18, maybe 20 years ago that when the decision was made arbitrarily to take the football finals from Altoona to Hershey, there were legislators, especially from the Altoona area, that took great exception to that. Hence, they created a PI Oversight Council that now does monitor, not nearly as closely as they did at their inception, but they do monitor what the state does now. They don't have oversight, but that's always a threat that the next time the PIA goes afoul of what it is that they'd like to see done, they're going to take it over. But they've not yet done so.
Here's another little interesting, you talked about that committee coming out of Altoona. I think it was Mello selected me to be on that committee. And I thought, oh man, is this great? I'm going to go down to Harrisburg and, you know, raise a little cane about how things are done. Well, anyhow, the meeting was this was in the year 2000, and the meeting was scheduled for when I was scheduled to be in Italy. Yeah, so I didn't get to serve, probably thankfully.
We've got a couple minutes left, Tim. What are your plans for after you step aside?
You know, Lanny, candidly, when the decision was made to do that, and the way this came about, the board, you know, I finished back, I guess it was June 30th of 19, my contract was up. And so the board came to me and said, well, how long do you want to do this? I said, well, I'm not going to stay forever. They said, well, we'll give you a 3-year extension. All we ask is, in that 3-year extension, that you give us at least 90 days notice of what it is that you might want to do. And they also brought in a young lady from the North Hills School District, Amy Schuneman, who has some South Hills. She spent some time down here at Bethel Park. I think people know Amy. Jimmy knows Amy. And they brought her in as the heir apparent, if you would, to work with. And, you know, as Christmas time came, I said, you know, she doesn't need any help. She's doing a great job. I said, I'll give them 180 days notice. So we notified them at the December board meeting that I'd step away June 30th. They effectively hired her in December, effective July 1st. And so that's the transition. So at the Christmas time, it seemed like a good idea. I don't know what I'm going to do now, Lanny. We'll figure it out in about 3 months. My wife said she's going back to work full time because she said 48 years of marital bliss that we've experienced will go away quite quickly if we tend to spend time together. So
a lot of time.
So anyhow, we'll see what happens, but we'll figure it out.
Well, you've done a fabulous job. Congratulations, and I'm so pleased that I've had a chance to get to know you, and thanks for joining Jim and me on the program today.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Tim O'Malley, Executive Director of the WPIAL, on our show 15241 Today Talk. Linda Dunzinski, our coordinating producer. Glenn Ward, our producer and director. And thank you very much for joining us.